The first thing I remember is the sound of clapping. Not the gentle kind that fills a room with warmth, but sharp, eager applause, like people were excited to see something break. I was standing under the soft lights of the prom hall, my dress brushing the floor, my hands folded the way my mother taught me when I was nervous. I remember thinking how unreal everything felt. The music. The laughter. The way my best friend, Lila, smiled at me from across the room as if she was proud of me just for being there. We had known each other since college orientation. Late-night talks, shared secrets, borrowed clothes. She was the first person I texted when something good happened and the first I ran to when something hurt. That night, I believed, truly believed, that she was still that person. When the DJ paused the music and invited people to share fun memories, I didn't think twice. Lila stood up, smoothing her dress, holding her phone like a microphone. She looked confident. Comfortable. Familiar. "I have something funny," she said, grinning. People leaned in. She started with a story about us studying together, something harmless. The room laughed. I smiled, relieved. Then her voice shifted, light, playful, careless. She mentioned a mistake I had made months ago. Something I had only ever told her in private. Something I trusted her to protect. The laughter grew louder. She kept going. Details spilled out like they belonged to everyone now. I felt the air leave my chest, like I'd been pushed underwater. I remember my ears ringing, my hands trembling, my smile freezing in place because I didn't know how to make it stop. I searched the room for someone, anyone, to meet my eyes and say, "This isn't okay." But people were laughing. Some looked uncomfortable, yes, but no one interrupted. No one stood up. And Lila? She laughed the loudest. "Relax," she said, glancing at me. "It's just fun. Just fun." The words stuck to me like something heavy and unwanted. I wanted to disappear into the floor, into the music, into anything quieter than that moment. My face burned, not from embarrassment alone, but from the sudden understanding that what mattered to me didn't matter to her. When she finally sat down, the applause came again. The DJ smiled. The music resumed. The night continued, as if nothing important had happened. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked myself into a stall, pressing my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. I stared at my reflection, my makeup still perfect, my eyes not quite believing what they had just witnessed. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt too exposed for tears. Later, when my family asked why I was quiet, I said I was tired. When I told them what happened, my aunt laughed softly and said she didn't mean anything by it. My cousin shrugged. Everyone was laughing. "Don't take it so seriously." Even my mother, brushing my hair back at home, said, "You know how people are." It was a joke. A joke. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Not just what she said, but how easily she said it. How safe she looked while I stood there feeling smaller than I ever had. I realized then that betrayal doesn't always come as anger or cruelty. Sometimes it arrives smiling, holding a microphone, wrapped in laughter you're expected to join. And that was the night something inside me quietly shifted, though I didn't yet know what it would cost me, or what it would eventually give back. The laughter didn't stay in the prom hall. It followed me home, settled into the corners of my room, and echoed in the quiet moments when I thought I was finally alone. The next morning, I woke up with that strange heaviness behind my eyes, the kind that comes from holding emotions in for too long. My phone was face down on my desk. I already knew what I would find if I turned it over, and still, my hand reached for it. Messages. Screenshots. Short videos clipped from the night before. Some people tagged me with laughing emojis. Others wrote things like, "She didn't mean it like that." A few said nothing at all, which somehow hurt more. Silence, I was learning, could be just as loud as mockery. Lila hadn't texted. I told myself she was asleep. That she'd wake up and realize what she'd done. That she'd apologize, the way friends do when they cross a line without meaning to. I waited. I folded laundry. I cleaned my room twice. I stared out the window as the day slowly moved on without me. By afternoon, a message finally arrived. You okay? Last night was funny, right? People loved it. I read it 3 times. Not a question. Not an apology. A gentle rewrite of the story where my discomfort had never existed. I typed a response and erased it. Typed another. Erased that too. I didn't trust myself to speak without breaking into something I wasn't ready to feel yet. So I put the phone down and chose silence, not as punishment, but as protection. At dinner, my family talked around me. Prom dresses. College plans. Who danced with whom? When my father mentioned Lila's name, I felt my shoulders tense without permission. She's always been outspoken, he said casually. You know that. Outspoken. Another word that softened the truth. I nodded and kept eating, even though food tasted like paper. I realized then how easily people protect what's familiar. It was easier to excuse her than to sit with my pain. Easier to call it humor than to admit it was betrayal. That night, I replayed smaller memories instead. Lila borrowing my journal just to read a line. Lila repeating something I'd told her in confidence, then laughing when I looked hurt. Moments I had dismissed because I didn't want to seem sensitive. Because I thought being understanding made me kind. I began to wonder how long I had been offering access to someone who didn't know how to hold it. The days that followed were quiet. No confrontation. No dramatic fallout. Just distance forming naturally, like space between 2 people walking in opposite directions. I stopped checking my phone as often. I stopped explaining myself. What surprised me most was the calm that came with the silence. It hurt, yes, but it also felt honest. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking myself to keep someone else comfortable. Still, doubt crept in during the evenings. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was what adulthood looked like, learning to laugh things off, learning to accept discomfort as normal. Everyone else seemed to have moved on so easily. But something inside me resisted that idea. Quietly. Firmly. I began to understand that pain doesn't need witnesses to be real. That just because others laugh doesn't mean you're required to join them. And that trust, once fractured, doesn't always break loudly, it often cracks in silence. On the 4th day after prom, my phone rang. The screen showed a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something, instinct, maybe, told me to answer. Hello? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. This is the school office, the woman on the other end said gently. We need to speak with you about something important. As she continued, my fingers tightened around the phone. Because suddenly, I knew. The laughter wasn't finished with me yet. And whatever came next would finally force the truth into the open. The woman from the school office spoke calmly, the way people do when they're trying not to alarm you. Her voice was measured, professional, careful with every word. That alone made my stomach tighten. There was an incident reported from prom night, she said. Your name was mentioned. We'd like you to come in this morning, if possible. I didn't ask why. I already knew the answer wouldn't be simple. The walk to the school felt longer than it ever had. Familiar buildings looked different, stripped of comfort. I kept replaying the moment on stage, Lila's smile, the laughter, the applause, trying to understand how something called fun could travel this far. In the office, I was offered a chair and a cup of water. I declined both. The counselor and an administrator sat across from me, folders neatly stacked between them. They didn't rush. They let the silence breathe, and in that space, I felt something settle inside me, an unexpected calm. They explained that multiple parents had called. Not to complain about prom logistics or music volume, but about what was said on stage. Someone had recorded the moment. Someone had sent it around. What had felt like a passing humiliation had become a documented event. It raised concerns, the counselor said gently. About consent. About privacy. About emotional safety. No one had ever used those words for me before. They showed me a transcript of what Lila had said, typed, official, stripped of laughter. On paper, it looked different. Heavier. Clearer. There was no playful tone to hide behind, no applause to soften the edges. Just words that never should have been public. The administrator explained that an internal review was already underway. That Lila had been asked to give a statement. That the school took situations like this seriously, even when they were disguised as jokes. I listened. I nodded. I didn't cry. What surprised me most wasn't the school's response, it was my own. I felt steady. Grounded. As if the confusion I'd been carrying had finally been named and placed somewhere outside my body. When I left the office, I sat on a bench near the entrance and let the sun warm my hands. I thought about how many times I had minimized my own hurt because no one else seemed bothered. How often I had doubted my instincts just because laughter surrounded the moment. That afternoon, Lila finally called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then she texted. Why didn't you tell me the school called you in? This is getting blown out of proportion. Blown out of proportion. I read the words slowly, carefully, the way you read something when you're deciding whether it still belongs in your life. There was no concern for me. Only for herself. Only for consequences she hadn't expected. For the first time, I saw our friendship without the soft focus I'd always used. I saw how often I had listened while she talked. How often I had forgiven without being asked. How easily my boundaries had been treated as optional. I didn't respond right away. That evening, my mother sat beside me on the couch. She had received a call too. This time, her tone was different, quieter, thoughtful. I didn't realize it was that serious, she said. I'm sorry I brushed it off. Her apology was small, but it mattered. It told me that the truth doesn't always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it comes in pieces, through time and reflection. That night, I wrote a message to Lila. Not long. Not emotional. What you shared wasn't yours to share. I trusted you. I need space. I sent it and felt something release in my chest, not relief exactly, but clarity. I understood then that strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand agreement. Sometimes it's just the moment you stop explaining your pain to people who benefit from not understanding it. And with that understanding, I knew the outcome wouldn't be about punishment or revenge. It would be about who I chose to become next. Time did what arguments never could. It created distance, and in that distance, clarity grew. The days after the school meeting passed quietly. There were no dramatic confrontations in hallways, no public apologies delivered for an audience. Lila avoided me, and I let her. I learned that silence, when chosen with intention, is not weakness, it is a boundary. People slowly stopped asking questions. The story lost its shine, as stories like that always do. What remained was something far more lasting, how I felt when I woke up in the morning. Lighter. Straighter. Less divided inside myself. I began to notice the difference between peace and loneliness. Loneliness felt sharp, like something missing. Peace felt steady, like something no longer draining me. I realized I had mistaken one for the other for a long time. One afternoon, I received an email from the school. The review had concluded. Without naming details, it confirmed that what happened had crossed ethical boundaries. Policies were updated. Future events would have clearer rules. The words were formal, restrained, but they mattered. Not because they punished someone, but because they acknowledged what had been wrong. I didn't forward the email. I didn't post about it. I didn't need anyone else to validate what I already knew. My family changed too, slowly. My mother began to listen more carefully when I spoke. My father stopped using humor to soften uncomfortable moments. There were no speeches about growth, no sudden transformations, just small, meaningful adjustments that told me my feelings now had weight. As for Lila, she sent one final message weeks later. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't think it was a big deal. I read it once and set the phone down. Intent, I had learned, does not erase impact. And explanations are not the same as accountability. I wished her well in my thoughts, genuinely, but I did not reopen the door. Some relationships are lessons, not destinations. I focused instead on building something quieter and stronger. New friendships formed without urgency. Conversations where I didn't feel like I had to perform. Laughter that didn't come at someone else's expense. I began trusting myself again, not blindly, but wisely. On a warm evening near the end of summer, I attended a small gathering. Nothing formal. No spotlight. Just people sitting in a circle, sharing stories. When I spoke, no one interrupted. No one laughed at the wrong moments. I felt seen without being exposed. That was when I understood the real outcome of everything I'd endured. I hadn't won. I hadn't proven anything. I had simply chosen myself. There is a quiet dignity in walking away without bitterness. In letting consequences unfold naturally. In understanding that respect doesn't need to be demanded, it's reflected back to you when you give it to yourself first. The lesson stayed with me, clear and steady. Not everyone who laughs with you is safe. Not every silence is loss. And emotional strength isn't about enduring everything, it's about knowing when to step back, when to stop explaining, and when to protect what's gentle inside you. That night, as I turned off the light, I felt something I hadn't felt since before prom. Peace. And this time, it was real.